Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we streamline complex sources into powerful insights. Today, we are taking quite a journey, actually, back to the 14th century.
We are. We're looking at a scholar whose work really just, well, it turned things upside down. In history, political science, even sociology.
We're talking about Ibn Khaldun,
Yeah.
and specifically his absolutely foundational work, the Muqaddimah, that's usually translated as Introduction to History.
And foundational is the right word, maybe even an understatement. The historian Arnold Toynbee, he called it undoubtedly the greatest work of its kind that has ever yet been created by any mind in any time or place.
Wow, okay, so that's quite the endorsement. Let's get a picture of the man himself. Ibn Khaldun, born 1332.
Right. A Mediterranean figure, roots in Yemen, background in Andalusia. He inherited so much Greek science, Arabic poetry. His whole life was this mix.
And the sources really highlight his that's his extensive travels, right?
Yeah.
And just incredible social movement. He wasn't just an academic.
No, not at all. Diplomat, judge, a key politician, often juggling these really high-stakes roles right in the middle of all this political chaos.
And that experience, it wasn't just, an interesting life story. It was basically his data.
Exactly. It fueled his big idea. Our mission today really is to unpack the method he came up with. His new science, he called it.
A new science for history, moving beyond just listing kings and dates.
Precisely. He wanted to get at historical truth. And his key was testing reported events against, well, the fundamental nature of civilization itself, how things actually work in societies.
Okay. And maybe the most dramatic example of his life intercepting with this kind of high-level political reality, that famous meeting he had.
Oh, yeah. With Tamerlane, 1401, outside Damascus, the city's under siege.
Terrifying situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Ibn Khaldun, always the strategist, apparently he gets an audience with Tamerlane, the world conqueror.
That takes some nerve. Tamerlane wasn't exactly known for his friendly chats.
Notorious. But Khaldun uses the meeting. He advises Tamerlane on North Africa, wins his trust somehow. And the amazing part,
He survived.
he survived, yes, but more than that, he saw Tamerlane and his Turco-Mongol forces as proof, living proof of his own theory.
Proof of what exactly?
Proof of how history cycles. This constant interplay he saw between the tough, resilient, primitive groups, as he termed them, and the more decadent, settled urban civilizations. He saw Tamerlane as representing that raw, conquering force.
Incredible. So that's the kind of field research he was doing, in a way. Now, let's look at the scholar himself. You mentioned he was a jurist, a faqih, but also an adib, a literateur. Why is that combination important?
That's really the key, I think, that duality. As a jurist, he's all about rigor, precedent, checking sources, verification.
Standard legal thinking.
Right. But as a literateur, someone deep in language and culture, he's sensitive to words, how their meanings shift, how context, time, place changes everything. Polyvalence,
Okay, so he's got this legal mind focused on proof and this literary sensitivity to meaning and change.
And that combination lets him look at the history books of his day and say, wait a minute, this isn't good enough.
He was pretty harsh, wasn't he? Calling it untrue gossip, false reports, crippled by blind trust in tradition.
He really was. He saw history just skimming the surface, political events, battles, maybe some famous sayings. He wanted the inner meaning.
The why behind it all.
Exactly, which meant digging deeper into philosophy, speculation, understanding the causes, the origins. He explicitly says history needs to be firmly rooted in philosophy.
And you can see that deep thinking in how he organized the Muqaddimah itself, those 6 main chapters. There's a definite logic there.
Oh, absolutely. It's not random. It follows his idea of, human necessity, how civilizations build up.
So walk us through it. How does it start?
Okay, so chapter 1, human civilization in general, just the basics. Then chapter 2, desert life, tribes Badawa, because that's where you get the raw group cohesion needed for survival.
Right, the foundation.
Then, chapter 3, dynasties, the state, the caliphate, which grows out of that tribal cohesion, that group feeling.
Okay, so group, then state, then what?
Once you have a stable state, you get chapter 4, sedentary civilization,
Yeah.
cities.
And the cities need.
Chapter 5, crafts and making a living, the practical stuff, the necessities, how people actually feed and house themselves.
Right, and only then.
Only then, right at the end, chapter 6, the sciences.
You put sciences last. That seems counterintuitive, maybe.
Well, not for him. It wasn't about importance in some abstract sense. It was about sequence. Sciences are a kind of luxury. a convenience, the result of having all that other stuff sorted out.
You can't really focus on astronomy or advanced math if you're worried about basic survival or your city falling apart.
That's precisely his point. The structure itself demonstrates his whole worldview: material needs, social organization, political stability, then the higher intellectual pursuits.
Okay, that structure is fascinating in itself. But let's get to the real engine room here. His method. You said he borrowed something from juridical logic.
Yes, this is the absolute core of his innovation for history. He takes a distinction from Islamic law about verifying different kinds of statements.
Okay, what's the distinction?
Well, in law, you deal with, let's say, two main types. One is normative, like a command, a rule, do this, don't do that. Think religious law, injunctions.
Got it. Like a legal requirement.
Right. The other type is indicative, a statement about something that happened, or a description of fact. In his terms, an event, or havar.
Okay, normative rules versus factual events. So how do they verify the truth of a normative rule, like a religious commandment?
For that, it was mostly about the transmitters, what they called personality criticism. Is the chain of people who passed down this rule reliable? Are they known to be honest, pious, good memory?
Just checking the source, the person.
Pretty much. If the chain of narrators was sound, the rule or tradition was generally accepted.
But Ibn Khaldun says for history, for events, that's not enough. Why not? Why doesn't the narrator's integrity guarantee the truth of a historical report?
Because history deals with what is possible in the real world. For an event, yeah, you still need to check the narrator. Personality criticism still matters. But you also need something else, an external check.
External to the narrator.
Yes. You have to check if the information itself conforms, the word is muthabaka, with the general conditions. Meaning, does this story align with the known laws of how societies function, how physics works, how geography works?
So it's about the content of the story itself, checked against reality.
Exactly. He argues that for history, checking the inherent possibility of the event is actually more important than just checking the moral character of the person telling the tale.
So if a story violates basic logic or logistics or how power dynamics usually play out,
then you reject it, even if the most trustworthy scholar imaginable reported it. Because the event itself couldn't have happened that way. It fails the possibility test. That's the radical shift.
that is a huge leap. It moves history towards something more like, well, social science.
It really does. And doing that external check means you need to understand the forces holding society together, which brings us to his most famous concept, doesn't it?
Abia, group feeling. It comes up constantly. How should we, understand that today?
It's tricky to translate perfectly. Group feeling is Rosenthal's attempt. Think of it as social solidarity, group cohesion, tribal loyalty, nationalism maybe, even intense esprit de corps.
That inner glue.
Yeah, that collective will.
Yeah.
Often unconscious, but incredibly powerful. He connects it to the legal idea of ima consensus, but makes it political. It's the driving force.
Driving force for what?
For power, for conquest, for building a dynasty. He argues you simply cannot achieve or maintain political power without a strong shared abiya uniting a group. It's the essential ingredient.
Okay. So you need this rigorous method check possibility against the laws of civilization, and you need to understand this key force of Let's see it in action. How did he use this to debunk historical errors? Error number one, crazy numbers, right? Exaggeration.
Right. The classic case he uses is the historian Al-Matudi reporting that Moses led an army of over 600,000 fighting men out of Egypt.
600,000
Yeah.
in the Sinai Desert. I mean, just thinking about the logistic.
Exactly. Khaldun basically says, let's do the math here. An army that size, it couldn't function. The lines would be so long, one flank wouldn't have a clue what the other was doing. They couldn't maneuver or fight effectively.
And feeding them,
Well,
watering them.
Forget about it. He points out that the entire region, Egypt and Syria combined, likely couldn't support that many soldiers logistically. He compares it to the known size of huge Persian armies, maybe 120,000 tops, so 600,000. It's just numerically impossible given the realities of warfare and geography at the time.
It fails the possibility test. Simple as that.
Simple as that. He also adds a genealogical point that given the few generations between Jacob, Israel, and Moses, it's biologically improbable for their descendants to multiply into such a vast number of fighting men so quickly.
Okay, using multiple angles of possibility. What about error number two? Geography and, well, just plain fiction.
He goes after stories about the ancient Tubba kings of Yemen. There were tales of them raiding all the way across North Africa to the Maghrib.
Yemen to Morocco, that's a trek.
A massive trek. Again, logistics. Khaldun says, look at a map. They'd have to cross huge deserts, deal with all the nations in between, Copts, Canaanites, Berbers, whom they never actually conquered. How would they supply such an army over that distance?
Impossible.
It just doesn't hold up to geographical reality. He also dismisses related myths, like some sand river they supposedly crossed, which no traveler had ever actually seen or heard of. It's a legendary fluff, not history.
And this ties into that amazing example about Alexander the Great, right? The diving bell story.
Ah, yes. The story went that Alexander wanted to build Alexandria, but needed to see the seabed, maybe deal with sea monsters, so he supposedly had a wooden chest built with a glass window and dove down.
Sounds like something out of a fantasy tale.
Exactly. And Khaldun shoots it down, not just because it sounds silly, but based on the natural facts, as he puts it, based on the science of his time.
What was the scientific objection?
Air, or the lack of it. He reasoned that a person needs cool air to maintain what he called the vital spirit in the lungs. Deep underwater, even in a sealed box, the air would quickly become hot and corrupted, and the diver would perish almost instantly.
So a kind of pre-modern understanding of asphyxiation.
Pretty much. He's using a principle of biology, or perhaps physics as understood then, to say this historical anecdote cannot be true because it violates natural law, science over storytelling.
That is incredibly sharp, using the laws of nature as a historical filter. Okay, error number 3. Presentism. Judging the past by present standards.
Oh, this is a big one. Still a problem today, isn't it? Applying our own times assumptions and customs backwards.
Definitely. What example did he use?
He talks about Al-Ajjar, a really powerful, sometimes brutal, but effective governor in early Islam. There were reports that his father had been a school teacher.
Okay, so someone reading that in Khaldun's time or even later might think.
They'd think, humble origins. Because in their time, being a village school teacher was often a low-status job. Maybe seen as someone weak, indigent, and rootless, as Khaldun puts it. Someone just doing a craft to get by.
But that was projecting their present onto the past.
Exactly. Khaldun corrects them. He says, wait, back in early Islam, teaching the Quran and the law wasn't just some craft for survival. It was often done by respected members of the elite, the nobility. Al-Ajjaj's family, the Thaqif tribe, were powerful people. Teaching was part of transmitting their heritage and authority.
So the social meaning of school teacher had completely changed.
Completely. You have to understand the institutions and the social context of that specific time. You can't just use analogies from your own era.
Which again underlines why you need his whole method understanding the nature of civilization in its different phases.
Absolutely. Which leads us maybe to the most famous case study where he applies this, the fall of the Barmecides.
Ah, the Barmecides. Hugely powerful Persian family basically ran the Abbasid Caliphate for the Caliph Harun al-Rashid for a while.
They did, until al-Rashid suddenly, brutally wiped them out, destroyed the whole family. And the popular story, the one the storytellers loved,
The gossip column version.
pretty much was that it was all because of a secret love affair. The caliph's sister, Al-Abbasa, supposedly had a secret, unconsummated marriage arranged with Jafar al-Barmaki, but, wink wink, things went further, she got pregnant, and the caliph flew into a rage and destroyed them all.
Sounds like a soap opera plot.
It does, and Khaldun just dismisses it out of hand, calls it political slander, fiction.
Why? On what ground?
Social possibility again. He says, look at her status. Daughter of a caliph, sister of a caliph, descendant of the prophet's uncle, Abbasid royalty, the modesty codes, the honor of the lineage. It's just inconceivable, he argues, that someone of her rank would risk everything for a secret affair with, essentially, a high-ranking courtier, even one as powerful as Jafar. It violates the social norms and expectations of that elite Arab milieu.
So the juicy story fails the sociological reality check.
It will.
What was the real reason, according to Khaldun's analysis?
Power. Pure and simple politics. The Barmecides had gotten too big for their boots.
How so?
They were controlling everything, appointing their own people to all the top jobs, managing and allegedly keeping vast amounts of state revenue. They were basically running a parallel administration.
Which would inevitably clash with the caliph's own authority.
Inevitably. Ar-Rashid felt overshadowed, controlled, maybe even threatened by their influence and their network. It was insubordination, a challenge to his ultimate authority. The destruction of the Barmecides wasn't about a secret pregnancy. It was a classic, brutal consolidation of power.
A struggle for control, which Khaldun would say is natural and easily explained by the laws of government and arbia.
Exactly. Political reality, based on how power actually works, trumps the sensationalist fiction every time for him.
That rigor, that insistence on reality checking, that's what we're still talking about him centuries later. So just to recap the main thrust here, Ibn Khaldun wanted a solid method, a reliable yardstick for historians.
Right. And he found it by looking at Qumran human social organization and figuring out the underlying laws that govern how societies rise, fall, and function.
And you mentioned earlier, this wasn't just an academic exercise for him. It felt urgent.
Deeply urgent. He lived through the Black Death, the Great Plague of the mid-14th century. He saw its devastating impact firsthand.
How did that connect to his work?
He writes explicitly that after the plague, the entire inhabited world changed. Populations crashed, cities declined, economies were disrupted, whole dynasties weakened. He felt the old assumptions, the old conditions historians relied on just didn't apply anymore.
So the world itself had shifted so drastically, it demanded a new way of analyzing it.
That's the sense you get. He built this new science because the ground had literally shifted beneath civilization's feet. The old maps were useless.
And that idea that we constantly need to reevaluate the conditions shaping our own time, that feels incredibly relevant right now.
It really does. Maybe we can close with that quote he has about the cycle of politics. It ties everything together so well, the interconnectedness of it all.
Which quote is that?
It starts, "The world is a garden, the fence of which is the dynasty."
Ah, right. The dynasty is an authority through which life is given to proper behavior.
Proper behavior is a policy directed by the ruler. The ruler is supported by the soldiers.
The soldiers are kept together by the money, and the money is collected by the ruler from his subjects.
And the subjects are only slaves if they're led by justice. It's this perfect loop, you see. Justice, economy, military leadership, policy. It's all connected.
And the challenge he leaves us with, really, is to apply that same critical lens, that same demand for understanding the underlying connections and possibilities to our world.
Exactly. What are the stories we're told today that might crumble under a Khaldunian reality check? What are the real struggles over power, resources, and social cohesion, the abia driving events behind the sensational headlines?
That's the question to ponder. A fantastic framework for critical thinking.
It truly is. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.